I do not get it. Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Well, after a weekend of the Trump White House reportedly reeling in the shock of a New York Times report that White House counsel Don McGahn is a fully cooperating witness for Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller, tonight the White House is trying to turn that big story around with a very big leak from the Trump legal team to the Washington Post. Tonight's Washington Post lead is White House counsel Don McGahn does not believe that he implicated President Trump in any legal wrongdoing. In extensive interviews he has given the special counsel, McGahn's attorney told Trump's legal team in recent days. That in recent days certainly sounds like it's in reaction to this weekend's reports by the New York Times. The Washington Post reveals that Don McGahn's criminal defense attorney, Bill Burke, sent an email to the Trump legal team in those recent days, in which Burke writes, quote, "He did not incriminate him." The Post reports McGahn's attorney, Bill Burke, told Trump's lawyers this past weekend that McGahn did not assert that Trump engaged in any wrongdoing. The New York Times revealed this weekend that Don McGahn submitted to at least 3 voluntary interviews with investigators that totaled 30 hours over the past 9 months. McGahn reportedly discussed the president's firing of National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and the president's firing of FBI Director James Comey and the president's conflicts with Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The Times reports Mr. McGahn gave to Mr. Mueller's investigators, the People said, a sense of the president's mindset in the days leading to the firing of Mr. Comey, how the White House handled the firing of former National Security Advisor Michael T. Flynn, and how Mr. Trump repeatedly berated Mr. Sessions, tried to get him to assert control over the investigation, and threatened to fire him. Don McGahn's cooperation is central to the special prosecutor's investigation of possible obstruction of justice by the president. In a follow-up report after its original story, the New York Times reported that President Trump's lawyers don't know how much Don McGahn told the special prosecutor. Mr. Trump's lawyers realized on Saturday that they had not been provided a full accounting after the New York Times published an article describing Mr. McGahn's extensive cooperation with Mr. Mueller's office. After Mr. McGahn was initially interviewed by the special counsel's office in November, Mr. Trump's lawyers never asked for a complete description of what Mr. McGahn had said, according to a person close to the president. Yesterday, in what was, for reasons we will get to later, Rudy Giuliani's most spectacularly ridiculous TV interview ever, Giuliani actually admitted that the Trump lawyers do not know everything Don McGahn told the special prosecutor.
We have a good sense, obviously, of what Mr. McGahn testified to. I can figure it out from...
How do you say that good sense? Have you debriefed him?
No, but Mr. Dowd has a good sense of it. He talked to them at the time.
The Times reports that Rudy Giuliani refused to follow Trump's orders on television yesterday. The article set off a scramble on Saturday among Mr. Trump's lawyers and advisors. The president, sequestered at his private golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey, solicited opinions from a small group of advisors on the possible repercussions from the article. The president ordered Mr. Giuliani to tell reporters that the article was wrong. But Mr. Giuliani did not go that far in his television appearances. Don McGahn, who was on Capitol Hill today with Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, ignored questions about this weekend's reports.
Why did you speak so long to the special counsel, Mr. McGahn?
Did you comply because you thought the president would betray you?
Do you regret that decision?
And like clockwork, when the news media reveals details of the Mueller investigation that disturb the president's tweeting becomes even more hysterical. This morning, the president tweeted these lies about Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller and his staff. Disgraced and discredited Bob Mueller and his whole group of angry Democrat thugs spent over 30 hours with the White House counsel, misspelled by the president. Only with my approval, for purposes of transparency. Anybody needing that much time when they know there is no Russian collusion is just someone looking for trouble. They are enjoying ruining people's lives and refuse to look at the real corruption on the Democrat side, the lies, the firings, the deleted emails, and so much more. Mueller's angry Dems are looking to impact the election. They are a national disgrace. Joining us now, Ken Dilanian, intelligence and national security reporter for NBC News, Jason Johnson, politics editor at TheRoot.com, and an MSNBC contributor, and Ron Klain, former chief of staff to Vice Presidents Joe Biden and Al Gore, and a former senior aide to President Obama. And Jason Johnson, when a Trump tweet ends with national disgrace, a tweet that includes a misspelling by the president, it reminds me of the days when misspelling was a national disgrace, when done by the Vice President of the United States, Dan Quayle, on the word potato, days that no one can really remember at this point. Here's the president, and the only reason I read the tweet is to note the level of hysteria, which increases in direct proportion, it appears, to just how disturbed the president is by the news he's reading or being read to him in the New York Times.
Lawrence, you could almost say he was unhinged by the way he seems to be responding to these things.
You know, I for one, I have to say, I've been avoiding that word since it became a book title, but it's a hard word to avoid.
Dancing around has been very difficult given the president's actual behavior. Yes, and this is a reflection of multiple things. One, again, 20-something years ago, the president spelling something wrong in public and correcting a child was a week-long news story. Now, literally, we have a new controversy. If a scandal is happening, it must be a day that ends in Y with this administration. But the larger issue, again, is this. You have a president who is constantly screaming and attacking an investigation as to whether or not he tries to stop people from investigating him. And that's part of the issue. He is confirming everything that they're trying to find out about him. And I'll say this very quickly about Don McGahn. Look, this is a guy with a long, extensive history in Washington, D.C. The FCC and the FEC, he was in the Abramoff case with Tom DeLay. This guy knows how to stay out of trouble. And so he's definitely going to reveal whatever it is he needs to reveal to Mueller, because he's got a career that he wants to extend beyond what this presidency may be able to handle.
Ron Klain, the most important phrase that I've read in all of this reporting about the McGahn interviews with the special prosecutor is the New York Times describing that Don McGahn has given them the president's mindset. The mindset on the firing of James Comey. Yeah. And so that can change what Rudy Giuliani and the president are trying to set up as a he said conflict, meaning James Comey says the president said something to him and about Flynn, and the president denies he ever said that about Flynn. Well, what if there is someone else in the White House who can actually confirm that the president did say something like what Jim Comey says the president said?
Yeah, Lawrence, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is a key thing. The hardest thing about proving an obstruction of justice case is proving that what the president did was with an intent to obstruct justice, to impede the investigation. And Don McGahn had a ringside seat for that intent and was involved in these various acts that Trump did, firing Comey, demanding that Mueller be fired, and actions taken against Rosenstein. So, he is a critical witness here, a critical part of it. And if you take a step back, you look at it, Lawrence, you've got a White House counsel now talking to prosecutors. You've got someone running around who taped the West Wing. You've got a president with an enemies list. We're just a few ABBA songs away from a remake of the 1970s. And that's what we're seeing. This looks like the Nixon White House all over again.
And Ken Dilanian, I want to go to something that the president said in an interview with Reuters today. And the president hastily arranged this interview with Reuters. And I think it's fair for us to consider that it might have been arranged in direct response to the New York Times reporting this weekend about Don McGahn's cooperation. And in it, the president is echoing something that Rudy Giuliani just keeps saying relentlessly. And this is about the so-called what they call the possible perjury trap. This is the president talking to Reuters. He says, so if I say something that Comey says something, and it's my word against his, and he's best friends with Mueller, so Mueller might say, well, I believe Comey, and even if I'm telling the truth, that makes me a liar. That's no good. Now, Ken, the Don McGahn reporting, as I say, interests me most when it comes to the possibility that Don McGahn might be able to change the Comey versus Trump story from Comey's word versus Trump's word to Trump's word versus Comey's word, plus possibly something from Don McGahn.
100%, Lawrence. But first, a word about that tweet. It's inconsistent with the facts and it's inconsistent with American values. That's not a partisan statement. Robert Mueller volunteered for Vietnam, was wounded in combat, led the FBI after 9/11. There are prosecutors on that team with sterling records. Greg Andres, who is the lead prosecutor in the Manafort case, took out the Bonanno crime family in New York, got so far into their skin that they threatened to kill him. He had 24/7 security for a year. These are public servants who have given over their careers to serving the American public and bringing people to justice. Donald Trump may not like what they're doing, but he is sounding like every politician I've ever reported on who's been under criminal investigation by the FBI. And you're absolutely right, Don McGahn could be a crucial witness. And this story in the Washington Post, where sources are suggesting he didn't incriminate the president, I read that as this is the Giuliani philosophy that the president can't obstruct justice because he can fire whoever he wants for any reason. I don't think that Robert Mueller believes that. I don't think a lot of legal experts believe that. If he fired Comey for corrupt reasons, if he asked Comey to go easy on Flynn for corrupt reasons, and if McGahn can help Mueller establish that, that's obstruction of justice. Now, Mueller, I don't think is going to indict the president. A Justice Department doctrine says you can't charge a sitting president, but I think we're moving towards a comprehensive report that's going to go to Congress that may be more damning than we can possibly imagine sitting here right now.
Ken, I'm so glad you went back to the president's tweet that he begins by calling Bob Mueller disgraced and discredited, which is just the most disgraceful thing that this president could possibly say about Bob Mueller as a person. If he wants to criticize his prosecutorial work, that is one thing, but I'm so glad you went back to that. And also, Ken, this point that that the president is the White House is putting out tonight, clearly coming from the White House to the Washington Post, that, oh no, Don McGahn's lawyer has told us that he did not incriminate the president. That could mean anything. That could mean that Don McGahn's lawyer has told them, Don McGahn did not say, I saw the president commit a crime. I saw the president commit obstruction of justice. But Don McGahn could have told them exactly what he saw the president do, and the prosecutors could decide what they've just heard is a crime.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the New York Times, which seems to have a pipeline into Don McGahn and his version of events, has already reported extensively on these episodes, right? That Trump insisted that McGahn help him fire Mueller, and McGahn refused to carry out that order because he thought it was improper. That Trump was pressuring people around him to get rid of Jeff Sessions, or was moving forward with a plan to fire Jeff Sessions. All of that, I think, is deeply relevant, and McGahn can bring Mueller inside the Oval Office into those intimate conversations. And the bizarre thing about this, Lawrence, is, you know, the White House could have asserted executive privilege. And they could have at least tried to prevent some of this interview. I mean, they may have lost, but they could have strung it out. They didn't do that. And that went to the earlier legal strategy of Ty Cobb and John Dowd, Donald Trump's former lawyers who are no longer there, to fully cooperate with the Mueller investigation. And also, according to the New York Times, McGahn deciding that he felt that Trump was setting him up to take the fall. So he was going to go in there with his lawyer and tell Mueller everything and do 30 hours of interviews. And we heard Steve Schmidt, a Republican political consultant on Nicole Wallace's show today, who said, I know Don McGahn very well. I had an office next to him. He is not going to go to jail and be disbarred for Donald Trump.
Yeah, that seems to be the consensus of people who know Don McGahn. Ken Dilanian, Ron Klain, Jason Johnson, thanks for starting us off tonight. And when we come